August, a month that brings promise, a month that brings a DLC pack, a blood pack, and the Immortal Empires campaign. And that is the focus of this video here today. What campaign is going to be your first campaign in Immortal Empires? Nick Grady, the individual who put together a massive survey to find out, which campaigns and which races are most popular in Warhammer 2, has done the same thing here for Immortal Empires, and he shared that information with me. So we're going to be going through that information here today. You can find a link in the upper right corner to the previous game's set of information, basically saying that Empire, High Elves, and Skaven, of course, were some of the highest hitting legendary lord and race combinations amongst everyone playing Mortal Empires. But Immortal Empires is going to see a somewhat similar, but also a very different trend. So we're going to take a look at this. This is only 4,200 responses. So obviously there's a much larger population that plays the game. This is only a sample thus of. So please take that in mind. This is not hard concrete fact. It's just kind of, hey, here's a good indication of probably a general trend that the campaigns will follow. And as we're looking at this data set, you'll find that two sets of information on it are going to say Village unconfirmed. This was sent out before his reveal video, and we know Valkia the Bloody, it says unconfirmed in this video too. It will obviously be confirmed as of that leak. I can confirm that we have access to the DLC and the Immortal Empires, but we were under NDAs and couldn't say anything up until this point anyway. So let's go ahead and have some fun. We'll talk about this data set. And the poll question of the day, before we even get into the video, is what will be your first legendary lore that you play in Immortal Empires? I know I've asked that before, but it feels too appropriate to this video to pass up. You know what? Rather than saying your legendary lord, I want to know which specific race you will play of the 23 races available. So let's go ahead here and take a look at your first campaign in Immortal Empires. So here we are with some data. We're just going to do this very low tech, old fashioned. And I apologize if that is off-putting, which is a joke about pudding to any of you guys, but it's probably just the easiest way to go through this information because I'm scatterbrained and I like to kind of go over it a bunch of times. And accompanying us is the lovely High Elf soundtrack from Warhammer 2, because as we've agreed, Warhammer 2 is the better and more superior soundtrack. So which of the races will you play first? Taking a look at this, the winner is Warriors of Chaos, and that really doesn't surprise me because it has 4 new legendary lords coming with it. Runner-up is Empire, though, at 11%. So I would wonder what this spread would look like without the Warriors of Chaos DLC being attached to this. I think that by and large, a lot of people want to play Warriors of Chaos because they want to play all those new legendary lords. And that is, of course, going to be a huge drawing point. But outside of that, and we're going to, when we jump down to the next section, it's going to have a pretty interesting breakout here. Outside of that is all of the new conventions and reworks coming to the Warriors of Chaos, all the new, I guess, units, you could say, right? With all the stuff that's coming in with the individual champions of chaos, the CACs, and we're gonna have to see how that affects itself, because when we look at, wait, hold on, I gotta look at the most important one on this list. Where are the High Elves? Okay, 4.8%. That, come on, guys, you gotta be wanting to play High Elves more. But number 3 on the list is, of course, Dwarfs, followed then by Lizardmen at actually 6.6%. So it's pretty surprising to see that Lizardmen, which were not in the top 3 before, are definitely now, I'm sorry, not in the top 5 before, are definitely in the top 5, tying it up with the vampire counts, right? With only 1 vote difference, the Lizardmen and vampire counts are split apart. Now, this is, I think, largely because High Elves, which were the 3rd most popular race in Warhammer 2, maybe it was actually 2nd, but either way, in the top 3, I think it's because the High Elves haven't changed much. If you look at this kind of this blowout, Empire, okay, we've got a whole new starting location for Volkmar, which people are very stoked on. We have Karl Franz being Karl Franz. But when we look at Dwarfs, we have Grombrindal in a brand new area right up against Malekith. We look at the Lizardmen, Nakai, and Tato Echo? No, not Tato Echo. I am a chameleon skink and I hang out in the southern portion of the world. That's the guy I'm talking about. You all know who it is. Oxyodal? That's it. I don't know. But either way, he's down there in the south portion of the map, in the southern Chaos Wastes, and the vampire counts have some wild new stuff, right? As it comes to both Vlad and Isabella, when we take a look at Gorst, when we look at Manfred. So I think that What's interesting about this data set for the races that will be played first, I think it comes down to either did they get a rework / DLC, obvious with Warriors of Chaos, or did they get exciting new changes to their start positions? And I think that's what we're seeing with a lot of these ones that are jumping into the top 5 or top 10 playables that were not that way before. Moving into which out of all the Legendary Lords will you play first, winner is Archaon. So, despite the fact that we have a whole brand new thing, oh, and it is worth noting, Warriors of Chaos, that includes Be'lakor, right? So, that is in that list, of course. And Warriors of Chaos, being 27%, has a DLC, but people still want to play Archaon above any other lord, as according to this 4,200 some odd response list. And then right after that, it's Karl Franz. So even a non-DLC character we've had in the game, it's not getting a new start, not getting new stuff in any way, shape, or form, still comes in number 2 on the list. Then we have Valkia the Bloody, who obviously, right, everyone would want to play her. Like, that's the character I'm most excited for, period, because it's my favorite champion of Chaos. It's my favorite Chaos character out of the ones that were not in the book, like Angra Deathsword, Ergrim von Horstmann, so all the ones that are never in any of the books anymore, those like the rule books, those are the ones that excite me the most outside of Valkia. So I think it's no surprise to see her at number 3 here. But we can see Festus is on this, Be'lakor at 4.3%, Isabella and Vlad at 3.9%, Grombrandal. So it's kind of following that trend, right? So Vlad and Isabella, well, that kind of hits up with that vampire count at 6%. We look at Valkia the Bloody, well, that falls into the Warriors of Chaos. We look at Grombrandal, that falls into this dwarf portion. So Karl Franz and Empire. Let's take a look at Volkmar, though, if we find him here. I don't think this is organized by, yeah, it is not alphabetical. Someone probably watched me, there it is. Volkmar. There he is, right here. So only at 2% of that total vote. So still a pretty sizable number. Obviously, it's no. Where's the one I want to play? Eltharion. If anyone was wondering, Eltharion is the character I want to play first, because I have an incessant love for high elves. Oh. Sorry, Eltharion. 0.8%. 32 people like you. Make it 33 because of me. But you can see again how these two charts really play well together, and you can see how that really fits in with these new positions of places being in the top 5 or top 10 of people wanting to play those respective campaigns. Now, after this point here, we're going to now talk about individual races and which lords people want to play of those races. So, of course, that's how the question is framed. Taking a look at this first one, first Beastman Legendary Lord Immortal Empires Campaign, not would you, like it says, I won't play, don't own this race, so that is an option here, but this at least gives us a breakout per legendary lord. So let's go through those all now. We'll start, of course, like I said, with the Beastman. And 20% of people just said they don't want to play it outright. 20% of the people here, we can say 884 just not going to touch Beastman. I'm included in that list, to be perfectly honest with you. I used to love Beastman when they first came out in 6th edition, but for some reason they just don't hold my fancy. But in the lead here is easily going to be Tarox. And it's surprising because the Beastmen, by and large, haven't moved a whole ton. They've shifted around a little bit. But I think the expectation here is now that Khorne is on the map and has actual presence, will Tarox get any different play style? And I think that kind of is the leading thing here. And I also think that of the Beastmen characters, he's the most fun. So I think it makes a lot of sense to see him at number 1. Followed, of course, by Malagor down here. Just to kind of probably see how not his new start, but how his start is changed in the grander scheme of everything with Alberic being moved and stuff like that, right? Yes, that's Malagor. Into Bretonnia, though, on that note, we can see that, again, 16% just don't have it. I'll always address that number, but the number 1 winner here is Alberic, and you're probably seeing a trend. The people that are in new and exciting or different locations are the ones that people are going to want to play the most in those respective races. So Alberic has a brand new starting location. Lone Leonkar is always going to have a really high margin, just like Karl Franz, just like Archaon, because they are not only just identifiable characters, but they are meme characters. So they're logically going to have a pretty high place on any of these lists. Faye Enchantress is not as meme, right? And I don't know why. I think Faye Enchantress is a pretty fun character. She's stupid strong. Rapont's going to be in the same location, but it holds a pretty good lion's share of this. at 17% too, because she's still a very strong, very fun character, and she has a lot of stuff going against her. But again, Albric is going to be very crazy in the Southland. Nope, not in the Southlands, in Lustria, as he kind of has this brand new Bretonnian colony action going on that he can ally with the Empire, with the Huntsman just to his northwest. Moving into the Demon Prince Legendary Lord, I mean, this might be a bit of a misnomer here, because Be'lakor isn't a demon prince in the sense that he's a demon faction. He's a warrior of chaos. So naturally, people I think are going to want to gravitate towards Be'lakor because he's a brand new character, as far as him being a dedicated legendary lord and not just a lord you get after completing a campaign. And he's got a really crazy fun start in Albion, so he'll be able to range pretty much any location in that northern portion of the map. So I think him taking up 68% of this vote makes a lot of sense at 2,900. Whoo! And I wonder how Daniel the Demon's going to play out with the Warriors of Chaos. Didn't they say something about like him getting new parts? Either way, I hope everything that comes with any kind of demon or warrior stuff, chaos related, adds parts to Danny Dan, because I want Stormy Daniels here to be more interesting. I don't want him to be the same character, the same Build-A-Bear throughout the life cycle of the game. I want him to have a little bit more longevity attached to him. And I also want other characters to have the Build-A-Bear mechanic. So moving into the Cathayan one, Miao Ying is going to be taking up 54% of this. Maybe it's because she's got a little bit more of a provocative start. Zhao Ming seems to be a little bit slower and more boring because he's far to the south. He does have some opposition with Nakai and with Snikch, but I think that Miao Ying is going to start right by Village, right by Lokir. You're going to have to deal with Kolek eventually. You've got Grimgor over there, so I think that Miao Ying probably presents a little bit more enjoyable. This also might be an indication of people like Miao Ying over Zhao Ming in general. And I don't know. I personally think Zhao Ming is very strong and very fun. I think his dragon form is just ridiculous, but that's my personal preference. Moving into our Dark Elves, we get 30% with Lokir Felhart. You guys know why, because he's in a whole new, exciting, fun starting location. As illustrated in my video linked in the upper right corner, about how all these starting locations are going to change the game for these respective races and legendary lords. We're going to see that represented here with Lokir. Malekith naturally coming in at 21.8% because he doesn't have a different start, but he has now different opposition. You kind of look at the dichotomy between Grombrindal and Malekith. Maybe you fall on the Malekith side of that conflict and you want to fight against Grombrindal. So it's not just simply the placement of a new legendary lord makes that legendary lord fun. It's the location that legendary lord now occupies makes all the legendary lords around him a little bit more interesting because they now have a different style of opposition against them. So now Malekith has to kit heavy into AP and anti-infantry to fight against Grombrindal, which he didn't really have to do in the past. He could have just simply go with a lot of anti-infantry to deal with a ton of Norskins and Wood Elves and other Dark Elves. He didn't have to go that hard in the paint with AP. So it'll be fun to see how Malekith plays out now with Grombrindal. And also, he's Malekith. It's a meme, right? I hate snow. Now, for the first Dwarf Legendary Lord, come on, we all know. It's Grom. It's Grom. It falls in line 100% with what I just said. I sound like a goddamn sports announcer at this point. Yeah, I was talking to him in the locker room, and he said that when they hit the court today, they just want to get a W. And I think that's a great mentality to have. What does that mean, Dan? So we see that here with Grom, 40% of the vote. Everyone else, for the most part, Thorgrim leading the charge right after that at whopping 17%. But then Thoric and Belagar pretty tied up. And then 12% of people have the right idea in saying that they will not play this race because we both know that the High Elves won the War of the Beard. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. Let's move on to the Empire. And leading the charge here is Karl Franz. Now this is an instance too where the meme kind of popularity to kind of outweighs the new location, right? We saw the same thing with Archaon. Archaon isn't really in a new location. He's just a little further northeast. Not that drastic. Of course, now he has Kislev to contend with. But Karl and Archaon, Karl Franz and Archaon are two of the most pivotal and iconic characters of the series. So it's natural that people would want to gravitate towards either the antagonist or protagonist of the story, more or less, quote unquote, of the story of Warhammer Fantasy in its own way, shape, or form, right? Like Empire against Chaos, if you want to think of it that way. But 28% though, right after it fall into Volkmar the Grim. Interesting enough though that okay, I swear I'm not colorblind. I looked at this and I was like, this is green. No, it's not. It's red. Balthazar Gelt is 16%. I thought that this was Marcus Wolfhard. I was like, interesting that Marcus is at 16% because I think he's the least interesting of the lords, even though he does have some fun, cool mechanics. But Gelt here at 16% right after, followed by Marcus Wolfhard. But makes a lot of sense here. For greenskins, guess what? Guess we got a brand new starting position. It's Grimgor Ironhide. And I think by and large, people would almost always gravitate towards Grimgor. Grom coming in here at second place at 14.9% does make sense because he does have a new starting position and he has probably the most fleshed out new mechanics of those lords, even though they did just get that greenskin rework with Grom the Paunch's DLC. Into my favorite race, we have a pretty, not even split, but a good split here. Majority of people want to play Imric, and I think that is led. There's two prongs to that. A, his starting position's not different than it was in Immortal Empires. It's just more expanded. There's more around him. He can actually move east and north. He doesn't have to move west. But I think we all know the big reason people want to play Imric. They want to go over to Cathay and they want to start the Miao Ying Imric waifu ship, and they want that alliance to happen too. So that I think again is an instance where the meme is going to win the day here. You've got Tyrion at 16%, which is surprising. I would have thought that Teclis would have been higher percentage wise here because Tyrion's the same old start. Same thing here with Alariel, who's down at 6%. But Teclis is at 14.9, Eltharion right in front of him, with a whole slew of cool mechanics because he's High Elf Batman. What a weird and interesting and fun way to envision that character. But I would have thought Teclis would have been right after Imric because Teclis' start location is pretty ass wild. You know, right down there at the far bottom south of the Southlands. He's got to contend with Kairos Fateweaver. He can unite the Elven colonies right there, which is pretty cool. He can somehow get contact with Imric and create that alliance too. So I think that of the new starting positions for the High Elves, meme aside, Teclis is probably the most exciting one because Teclis' start in the past was always very drab to me. It was never very terribly interesting. This, I think, finally makes him a little bit more of an interesting playthrough. Into the Servants of Khorne, we have Skarbrand or Valkia. Naturally, Valkia is going to lead the charge. I think even if Valkia launched with the game and there was no DLC, I think Valkia would lead the charge here. And I think personally, Skarbrand's the most fun of the 4 legendary lords for the demons because he can just rip and tear through everything. But Valkia is just such a fan favorite, right? So Valkia leading the charge there at 56%. There's not much to go off here because we don't know anything about Valkia. For the first Kislev legendary lord, Boris did it again. Looking at this, Tsarina Katarine 46% with Boris Ursus at 36%. Is it possible to have color dyslexia when you look at this and say that's red, look at this and go, oh yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about. God, I'm stupid. But Tsarina Katarine at 46.6%, followed by Boris Ursus at 36.1%. Natural here with Kostieltian down here at 6.9. Boris, I think, is going to be very interesting because he's pitted up in the northern Chaos Wastes beyond. Actually, is he in? Yeah, Northern Chaos Wastes. He's not in Norska. So he's got a very tumultuous path down to Kislev if he so wishes, or he's going to have to smash off against Archaon. Now, I did do a 1v1 with Archaon and Boris Ursus, just having them fight each other just straight up, and it was so close of a fight that I think that Archaon's ability to cast spells would probably put him a little bit above Boris, but having these two contend is going to be pretty wild. And I did it in a quick battle format, right? In just like a custom battle. When you have all the abilities to buff Boris Ursus's thing versus anti-large, you can see that he's going to be really, really fun to play against Archaon because of that anti-large is going to get through the roof. And those two are going to have a lot of fun to contend with each other. And Tsarina Katarine will also have all her usual shenanigans because her start hasn't even moved from the Chaos Realms map, right? But she'll just have to truly be the bastion of the north against the unending tide of chaos and Norska and demons. Into the Lizardmen. Now, the interesting thing here is Nakai is not number 1. He's not even number 2. He's not even number 3. I don't think he's even number 4. He's number 5. Is he? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, then 5. So Krok-Gar leads the way at 24%, followed then by Oxayotl, followed then by Gorok, and then I won't even play the race, and then we get Nakai. So it's interesting that Nakai does have a very crazy start, and I said this in that video where I talked about the changes. Nakai will be, in my opinion, the Lizardman character that gets pushed around the map a lot with every DLC that kind of fills in his location, because he's where I would think the Monkey King would be, or any kind of southern of the southern Cathayan lord, the son of the fire dragon one. I would think he would be down that region too. So I bet you Nakai is going to just be, he's going to fit the name Nakai the Wanderer, and they're going to pop him around as befits the DLCs and campaign packs that landed into the game. But Gorok, Krok-Gar, not Gorok, Krok-Gar leads the charge here, having some fun, being all just nasty up in that Southlands play, because he has just a lot more and interesting things. I think a lot of people want to play Krok-Gar against Skarbrand. I bet you that's kind of why that is like that. First Monogod Legendary Lord we're going to be seeing lead this thing is a pretty close one between Skarbrand and Kairos Fateweaver. Okay, so I didn't look at the color association here. This isn't a colorblind joke. I just thought that this would have been Skarbrand because it's red. But Skarbrand here at 24.6 versus Kairos' 25, and I think they both have very fun start locations. They're surrounded by so much shit that it's going to be pretty crazy for them. But I think what makes Kairos kind of edge out above Skarbrand is Kairos can jump across the water and try and make the Southern Chaos Realm his own, the Southern Chaos Wastes his own, which I think is very, very, very exciting. Then Nakari right after that, because he's now in Ulthuan, which it's going to be just a horny shit show over there, followed by Kugoth Plaguefather, because I think by and large people aren't as excited about Nurgle because of its mechanics right now. First Norskin Lord, Wulfric. I mean, it's always going to be Wulfric. Screw Throg. And those of you who have seen my campaign where Turn and I played Throg and Wulfric, you know why I do not like Throg. First Servant of the Nurgle Legendary Lords, we have Festus leading out above Kugoth. Of course, we know this to be true because of a DLC. Everyone's going to want to try that new character. And the first Ogre Legendary Lord here, we can see is going to be Grease's Goldtooth. I think Grease's, by and large, has a more interesting campaign. Scrag, though, it's going to be interesting to see how he deals with the Immortal Empires and having so much more pressure around him. True pressure, right? The problem with him in Chaos Realms is that he gets just stupid fat, and no pun intended, off of the fact that all the DLC units weren't in the game at the launch of the game, right? So Scrag will now be curtailed on his power curve. So it should be interesting to see if he just gets smashed out immediately, or if he actually can contend much better, or even stay true to his power spike like he did in Chaos Realms. First Skaven one, it's always Ikaclaw. Everyone loves the Skaven and power armor. It's just, you know it to be true, so it's your heart of hearts. Followed by Deathmaster Snikch, which is in Cathay, so you can create this really awesome Skaven Cathayan Empire, which I think is really, 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 really cool. Followed by, I won't even play this race, but then we have, that's interesting why it's doing that. Throt the Unclean, which is, again, I think a very fun one, because now you've got all these Kiss of Lords around you. You can really kind of range out from Hell Pit, and it's going to be, I think, a lot harder. Quick Head Taker also has a lot more opposition. He's moved a little bit further north than he was before, but not a huge drastic change. Surprising that Tretch is so low on this list. I think it's because Tretch himself is not a very interesting character, because he was a hero in the book, so there was not like a whole ton to even go off of with him. But putting him back at Brokeback Crookcrack back Mountain with Heath Ledger and Jake Gyllenhaal, I think is a really cool way to stay true to that lore, and I think it's going to be a very fun playthrough with him. But I think at the end of the day, he suffers from being Tretch Craventail at the end, so it's unfortunate, but he is at the very bottom of the list with Skrolk, which I think everyone's played Skrolk to death now at this point. First Servant of Slaanesh, again, it's going to be Azazel over in Akari. We know this because of that DLC. Tomb Kings, one does not serve, one plays Cetra. And it's interesting too that Kotep is above. It's not interesting. I think it makes sense that Kotep is above the rest because now he has different opposition with Gromvendal over there and a whole bunch of other ways that Kotep can even move across the map. How awesome would it be to have a Tomb King's Empire in Cathay jumping into those sea lanes right south of him? So a lot of fun to be had with Kotep. Now, Servant of Tzeentch, come on, we know what's up. We know what's up. It's Village. It's gonna be. I think. Outside of Valkia, Village I'm most excited for because I enjoy Tzeentch a lot. And I think that's kind of represented right here pretty well. A lot of people probably want to try out how Village's teleport mechanic is really going to, not his teleport mechanic, but his teleport discount is probably going to allow him to do some pretty wild stuff in movement across Cathay and other portions of the map. Vampire Coast, I'm going to take a sip of this little drink here. My throat is parched. This is the first time I've ever had a nitro cold brew. It's lovely. It's lovely. And I'm slow drinking it because I know I'm already sounding like a crackhead, but I'm making our way downtown. So Count Noctilus here at 38%, and followed by Luther Harkin and Aranessa and Salastra. Nothing's changed with these characters, but I think that Noctilus benefits from the ability to hit the most fun locations across the map. And I think by and large of the characters, Noctilus is the most memey and most iconic. Noctilus was in Dreadfleet. Luther Harkin is of course a very pivotal character in a lot of different things, but I think Noctilus is the one that people probably like the most, even just from like his overall character look and persona. I think people enjoy him the most, so it makes a lot of sense why he's at 38%. Into the vampire counts, we have Vlad von Karstein up at 41%, who is now going to be benefiting from Isabella von Karstein as a legendary hero, who is conversely the second least desired one on this list, with Heinrich Kemmler down at 5.2%. And then leading that after is Helman Gorst, which I think is pretty fair because he's tied with Manfred von Karstein by just a scant few amount of points right there, right? What is that, 36 points? So 36 votes. And they both get new and exciting start locations. I just think that the majority of people want to play Vlad to see what it's like with Isabella as a heroic hero and how heroic hero. I kind of like that. Holy shit. Legendary Lord, heroic hero. That's got to be it. Someone contact Creative Assembly. I've already named Immortal Empires. Let's call them Legendary Lords and Heroic Heroes. Holy crap. Oh, man, I'm just rocking that consonants. So that's what a nitro cold brew does to you if you've never had it for the first time. And then it's interesting that a lot of people don't want to play Isabella as their chief lord over Vlad, because I actually kind of like a lot of Isabella's mechanics for being able to heal and stay alive. But Helman Gorst over here being able to have some fun into Cathay, or at least the Darklands, is going to be very interesting up until we get Chaos Dwarfs. That will probably put him pretty heavily in line. Now, the first of the Warriors of Chaos Legendary Lords is obviously going to be Archaon, which just kind of fits in. He is the most popular Lord, period, on the list, so obviously he's going to lead this charge as well. Followed, of course, by Valkia the Bloody, and Be'lakor right after that. Now, again, this is skewed by the sense that these two are either brand new or now getting their first like kind of full wrap as legendary lords, right? Be'lakor is now going to have his own standalone ability to play, where you can just start an Albion, and then we're going to see Kolek, which actually sits above Sigvald, above Festus, and Village. So pretty interesting though that we're going to see Kolek above the other DLC characters, even Azazel, who is, I think he's the smallest on the list. Yeah, he's the smallest character on the list as far as people's desire to want to play of this 4200. So, and honestly, I think that kind of, I probably, if I had to mark their popularity, Valkia, Village, Azazel, and then Festus. I'm kind of surprised to see Festus above Azazel, because I think Festus is ultimately going to suffer from a lot of the same problems that Kugoth does. But I think the fact that he'll benefit from the Warriors of Chaos roster is going to make him so much more beneficial, right? However way that the roster actually kind of makes itself out. Now, for the Wood Elves here, we have the Sisters of Twilight leading the charge. Makes a lot of sense here with the ability to just kind of go kind of crazy with them all over the place. Brand new character. You get to have so much more fun, I think. Right after that, though, we get Draika, which is in a really wild start position, all the way now surrounded by Kislev, by Beastmen, by Ogres, by all sorts of crazy stuff. So I think Draika's character is going to be a lot of fun. And she was actually, by and large, I always feel like the FLC character kind of punches above their weight. You know, they're like, oh, it's an FLC character, but they always end up being so fun. Like Rapunzel was probably one of my favorite characters to come to the game. Draika was a really fun inclusion to the game too, with Sisters of Twilight. So I think it kind of holds true with Draika is going to be very fun compared to the other lords outside of Sisters of Twilight. Now, which DLC champion will you play first in Warhammer 3 or on Immortal Empires map? These were all Immortal Empires up to this point. And we can see here that this falls we were talking about. Valkia, and then Village, and then Azazel, and then Festus. So it's interesting that in this format of question, there's more votes to go around, so it spreads out kind of in the thought process I would have thought. Versus when you're looking at all the Warriors of Chaos, Azazel gets pushed down above a Sigvald, above a Kolek, the other characters that people I think want to play more by and large. So interesting to see how the DLC kind of filters out when you're only looking at those characters. So now that we've looked at everyone on the Immortal Empires campaign, let's just look at the legacy games and how people kind of view those races in a vacuum. Starting off with, will you play a Warhammer 1, 2, or 3 race first? Everyone, or not everyone, 51% of people want to play a Warhammer 1 race first because Warriors of Chaos and Empire are on that list. They were the top dogs, and then Dwarfs, I think we're number 3. So you can see, and Vampire Counts are also in that top 5. So you can see that just kind of immediately just jams us into this 51% split here, with the others going heavily into Warhammer 2, followed by Warhammer 3. I guess you could make the argument here that Warhammer 3 only really has 4 races. Well, no, it doesn't. It's got 7 races to choose from, right? The 4 Mono Gods, Cathay, Ogres, and Kislev. That's 7. So, whereas Warhammer 2 has got a ton, but still Warhammer 1 kind of wins that day. Now, with Warhammer 1 races, will you play first Warriors of Chaos again, followed by Empire, then Dwarfs, then Vampire Counts? It's like that spread that we talked about just a bit ago with the top 5, all being Warhammer 1 races, kind of eking right into that 51% right there. So you can just see that. The proof isn't that put into which of the Warhammer 2 races will you play first. We can see that Lizardmen, which fits the above thing we were talking about, of which the progression of top to bottom is from number 1 to number 10, basically. Followed by Skaven, and then High Elves, and then Dark Elves. So an interesting kind of spread right there, followed by which Warhammer 3 race will you play first. Cathay, interestingly enough, followed by Kislev, and then just barely Khorne Mono God over Demons of Chaos generic edition. So you can see that this is going to be a pretty wild time in Total War Warhammer history, right? Because we're looking at a time where we're finally seeing the culmination of all 3 of these games. We're finally going to be playing on a map that a lot of us have wanted to play on since we got into Warhammer 1. So it's kind of crazy to see that even though there's 23 races and 86 legendary lords, majority of people want to play the lords that have already existed, by and large, above the ones that are brand new. I mean, Valkia, again, is, what, number 3 on the list? I wish I could organize that by that. Yeah, 1, 2, then 3. So, I think that it's going to be very fun. It's going to be very exciting, and it's going to be really interesting to see how this all plays out. I'm really excited to start showing you guys some stuff with this in the days and weeks that come as we get closer and closer to the launch of the DLC, of the Blood Pack, of the Immortal Empires beta. Go ahead and let me know in the comment section below which race are you going to play first. We've already asked which legendary lord. Which race are you going to play first when you jump into Immortal Empires? I want to know. Does it match up? Do you want to play Warriors of Chaos first, or do you want to go Empire? Or are you in that minority that wants to jump into Cathay first when Immortal Empires boots up in late August? But as always, guys, thank you so much for watching here today. Again, a huge shout out to Nick Grady, a gentleman of a man, for presenting this information to me, and it's been a lot of fun going through it. I'm glad you guys could join me for my first Nitro Cold Brew, as I clearly am a scatterbrained moron. And this has been fun. We have plenty of other stuff to come up, and I've got another fun video planned, kind of not on this information, but somewhat similar to it. But as always, guys, thank you so much for watching here today. Have a good one, and take care.